Thank you for visiting Just All-in-One Resource. Anyone who is familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, and how the games are normally created by dungeon masters will understand what is going on. You do not require to understand the role of the dungeon master, and what follows next. In fact, it's a story about friends who gather together to play a tabletop game, and enjoying each other's company. Now, as you may know, if you wish to have a copy of the story to use for your own channel, I would appreciate it if you would send me an email asking for permission to use it. Creating these stories take a lot of work and energy. So let's begin. Kothfotmio sits in his armchair and begins organizing the tools of a dungeon master, and briefly reads over the story he has written, and as the lights in the room are turned off, candles are lit. The mood of the room becomes ominous, and the flames from the candles cast an eerie shadow throughout the room, and over the faces of the players who are eager to begin their adventure. Kothfotmio raises his head, and peers over the dungeon master shield. He looks at each of the players, and gives the name of this adventure. Into the Depths. In a far-off land, a legendary dungeon had been discovered, rumored to contain riches beyond measure and dangers that would test even the bravest adventurers. The dungeon was said to be so vast and complex that no one had ever made it to the end. Many adventurers had tried, but none had returned to tell the tale. One day, 3 adventurers decided to take on the challenge and explore the infamous dungeon. The first adventurer was a young woman named Arya, a skilled archer with a sharp wit. The second adventurer was a gruff, battle-hardened warrior named Forgar, wielding a massive battle axe. The third adventurer was a mysterious wizard named Kothfotmio, known for his powerful spells and enigmatic personality. As the adventurers descended into the dungeon's depths, they soon realized that the rumors were true. The dungeon was filled with perilous traps, deadly creatures, and ancient magic. Kothfotmio took on the role of the dungeon master, creating and controlling the various obstacles that the adventurers encountered. Will the adventurers be able to survive the dangers of the dungeon and reach the legendary treasure at the end? Only time will tell. The adventure begins. The 3 adventurers, gathered around a rough wooden table in a dingy tavern, huddled closer to listen as the dungeon master spun his tale. His name was Eric, but he preferred to go by his handle, Silver Dragon, and he had a reputation for crafting some of the most immersive and challenging dungeons in the realm. So, you find yourselves in a dark and musty dungeon, deep beneath the ruins of an ancient castle, Eric began, his eyes twinkling with excitement. The air is thick with the stench of decay, and the sound of dripping water echoes through the stone corridors. The adventurers leaned in closer, their eyes wide with anticipation. As you round a corner, you come face to face with a massive iron door, Eric continued, his voice dropping to a dramatic whisper. It's covered in rust and has no visible handle or lock. What do you do? Quote, Kothfotmio, a tall and burly warrior with a shaggy beard and a fierce glint in his eye, spoke up first. I want to check the door for any traps, he said, his voice tinged with excitement. Eric nodded approvingly. Roll a perception check, he said, as he dug through his collection of dice. The players leaned in closer, eagerly awaiting the outcome of the roll. Kothfotmio picked up his dice and gave them a quick shake before rolling them across the table. The dice clattered against the wood and came to rest, revealing a result of 17. Eric nodded again, his eyes glinting with approval. You notice that there are no traps on the door, but you do see that the hinges look rusty and weakened, he said, a hint of mischief in his voice. The other 2 players, a lithe and nimble rogue named Lyrian and a bookish wizard named Arcturus, exchanged a look. They knew that Eric's dungeons were notorious for their devious traps and deadly puzzles, and they had learned to be cautious in their explorations. Lyrian stepped forward and examined the door more closely. I want to try to open it quietly, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Eric raised an eyebrow. "Roll a stealth check," he said, as he watched Lyrian pick up her dice. The rogue closed her eyes and concentrated, then rolled the dice across the table. They bounced and spun before coming to rest, revealing a result of 19. "Nice," Eric said, a hint of surprise in his voice. You managed to slide the door open with barely a creak. Inside, you see a long, dark corridor stretching out before you. The walls are lined with torches, but they don't seem to be giving off any light. "What do you do?" he asked, looking at the players expectantly. Lyrian took a deep breath and stepped into the corridor, her eyes scanning the darkness for any signs of danger. Arcturus followed close behind, his staff held at the ready, while Kothphotmio brought up the rear. As they moved further down the corridor, they began to feel a sense of unease. The air grew colder, and the torches on the walls flickered and sputtered as if struggling to stay alight. Suddenly, Lyrian froze. "Wait," she whispered, holding up a hand. "I hear something up ahead." Eric leaned forward, his eyes glinting with excitement. "Roll a perception check," he said. Lyrian nodded and rolled her dice, her brow furrowed in concentration. The dice clattered against the table, and she looked up with a grin. "I got a 22, she said triumphantly. Eric's grin matched hers. "You hear a faint scraping sound coming from the end of the corridor," he said. "It sounds like something is dragging along the floor." Arcturus looked nervous. "Maybe we should turn back," he suggested. "This doesn't feel right." But Kothphotmio shook his head. "We came here to explore," he said firmly. "We can't turn back now." The group continued down the corridor, their weapons at the ready. As they reached the end, they saw a large, iron door with strange symbols etched into its surface. The scraping sound was coming from behind it. "What do you do?" Eric asked, a wicked gleam in his eye. Lyrian approached the door and examined the symbols, trying to decipher their meaning. "I think it's some sort of magical seal," she said. "It might be protecting something valuable." Arcturus nodded, his fingers twitching on his staff. "But what if it's protecting something dangerous?" he said. Kothphotmio stepped forward, his eyes glittering with excitement. "There's only one way to find out," he said, drawing his sword. With a fierce cry, he swung at the door, hoping to break the seal. But the sword bounced harmlessly off the iron surface, sending a jolt up his arm. "Maybe we should try something else," Lyrian said, wincing at the sound of the sword hitting the door. "Maybe there's a way to dispel the magic." Arcturus nodded, relieved. "That sounds like a better idea," he said. The group searched the corridor for clues, hoping to find a way to break the seal. After a few minutes, Lyrian noticed a small rune etched into the wall. "I think this might be a clue," she said, pointing to the symbol. Eric nodded, impressed. "Roll an Arcana check," he said. Lyrian rolled her dice, her eyes fixed on the symbol. The dice clattered against the table, and she looked up with a grin. "I got a 17, she said. Eric smiled. "You recognize the symbol as a dispel magic rune," he said. "You might be able to use it to break the seal." The group worked together to activate the rune, channeling their energy into it until it glowed bright blue. With a loud crack, the seal on the door shattered, and it creaked open. As they stepped inside, they were met with a blinding light, and a chorus of voices chanting in an unknown language. Kothphotmio grinned, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "This is it," he said. "This is what we came for." The dungeon master continued to describe the hallway to the players. They could see the rough-hewn walls, the torches flickering along the sides, casting eerie shadows. The air was damp and musty, and they could hear the faint sound of dripping water in the distance. Kothphotmio watched as the players exchanged nervous glances. They knew that danger was lurking around every corner, but they were also excited to see what lay ahead. The dungeon master's descriptions were so vivid that they felt like they were really there. As they walked further down the hallway, they noticed that the torches were spaced further apart. The darkness seemed to press in around them, making it difficult to see. Suddenly, they heard a strange noise coming from ahead. It sounded like something was shuffling towards them. The players drew their weapons and prepared for battle. Kothphotmio watched as the dungeon master described the creature that was approaching them. It was a goblin, with green skin and beady red eyes. It held a crude-looking weapon in its hand, ready to attack. The players charged forward, ready to take on the goblin. The dungeon master rolled the dice and announced the outcome of their attacks. The battle was intense, with the goblin putting up a fierce fight. In the end, however, the players emerged victorious. Kothphotmio watched as the players celebrated their victory. They high-fived each other and congratulated themselves on a job well done. They were eager to continue on their quest, deeper into the heart of the dungeon. As the group cautiously entered the next room, Kothphotmio described the scene before them. The room was much larger than the previous one, with several pillars lining the walls. In the center of the room, there was a pedestal with a glowing orb on top of it. As they approached the pedestal, Kothphotmio warned them to be careful, as he sensed a powerful magic emanating from the orb. Suddenly, the room shook and the doors behind them slammed shut, trapping the group inside. The players quickly realized that they were not alone in the room. As they looked around, they spotted several shadowy figures lurking in the shadows. Kothphotmio explained that these were shadow demons, minions of the dungeon's master, who had been summoned to guard the orb. The group braced themselves for battle, knowing that they must defeat the shadow demons to reach the orb. The fight was intense, with the demons darting in and out of the shadows, making it difficult for the players to land a hit. However, with Kothphotmio's guidance, the group was able to defeat the shadow demons and claim the glowing orb. As they picked it up, they felt a surge of power coursing through their bodies, and they knew that this would be a valuable tool in their quest to escape the dungeon. With the orb in their possession, the group pressed on, eager to discover what other challenges lay ahead. Kothphotmio led them deeper into the dungeon, his keen senses alert for any danger. After what seemed like hours of winding corridors and deadly traps, the group finally reached the heart of the dungeon. They entered a massive chamber, filled with treasure beyond their wildest dreams. But as they approached the treasure, they heard a deep, ominous voice echoing through the chamber. It was the dungeon's master, and he was not happy about the group's intrusion. Kothphotmio stepped forward, ready to face the master and protect his fellow players. With a flick of his wrist, he summoned a powerful spell, and the battle began. The battle was long and grueling, with both sides unleashing devastating attacks. But in the end, the group emerged victorious, having defeated the master and claimed the treasure as their own. With their mission accomplished, the group made their way back to the surface, eager to share their adventure with the world. They knew that they had just scratched the surface of what lay beneath the dungeon's depths, but they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. And with Kothphotmio as their guide, they were ready for anything. As the group moved through the dark and dank corridors, Kothphotmio led them to a room that seemed to be empty. However, upon closer inspection, they found a small lever on the wall that, when pulled, revealed a hidden passage leading deeper into the dungeon. Excitement filled the adventurers as they ventured deeper into the dungeon, encountering traps and obstacles along the way. Kothphotmio proved to be a valuable asset, his experience and knowledge of the dungeon aiding the group as they made their way further in. As they progressed, the group stumbled upon a room filled with treasure, but their joy was short-lived as they were suddenly ambushed by a group of goblins. Kothphotmio quickly sprang into action, his sword flashing as he engaged the goblins in battle. The rest of the group followed suit, weapons at the ready as they fought off the goblin ambush. In the end, the group emerged victorious, and they stood in the treasure room, their breaths coming in gasps as they took stock of their injuries. Koth-Thotmeo smiled, his eyes shining with excitement. "That was quite the adventure," he said, his voice filled with pride. "But there's still more to explore. Are you all ready for the next challenge?" Quote, "As the players move deeper into the dungeon, they come across a large chamber with a pool of shimmering water at its center. Koth-Thotmeo describes the water as magical, with the ability to heal any wounds and restore their energy. But as they approach the pool, they notice movement in the water. Suddenly, a giant tentacle emerges from the pool and wraps itself around one of the players. Koth-Thotmeo quickly informs them that the tentacle belongs to a kraken, a giant sea creature known for its ferocity and deadly attacks. The players have no choice but to fight back, and they engage in a tense battle with the kraken, dodging its attacks and striking back with all their might. Despite their best efforts, the kraken proves to be a formidable opponent. It thrashes around, knocking over pillars and causing rocks to rain down from the ceiling. The players are quickly running out of options when suddenly, one of them remembers a spell they learned early on in their training. They call upon the power of lightning and cast a devastating spell that hits the kraken with a massive bolt of energy. The creature writhes in pain, and with a final strike from the players, it falls back into the water and disappears beneath the surface. Exhausted and wounded, the players decide to rest and take advantage of the healing powers of the magical water. Koth-Thotmeo warns them that they must move quickly, as the kraken's defeat will surely draw the attention of other creatures within the dungeon. The players catch their breath and prepare to move forward, knowing that even greater dangers may lie ahead. The group of adventurers descended deeper into the dungeon, their torches flickering as they went. Koth-Thotmeo led the way, carefully scanning for any signs of danger. The tunnel they were in was long and winding, and it seemed to go on forever. They had been traveling for what felt like hours, and still there was no end in sight. Suddenly, they came across a large room with a high ceiling. In the center of the room stood a massive stone statue, which appeared to be some sort of ancient god. The statue was covered in strange runes and markings, and its eyes seemed to follow the adventurers as they approached. As they drew closer, they noticed that there was a small altar at the base of the statue. On the altar lay a small, intricately carved amulet. Koth-Thotmeo cautiously approached the altar and picked up the amulet, examining it closely. Suddenly, the room began to shake, and the statue came to life. The adventurers were caught off guard as the massive stone figure began to attack them with incredible force. Koth-Thotmeo quickly realized that the amulet he had picked up was the key to defeating the statue. With the help of his companions, Koth-Thotmeo was able to unlock the power of the amulet and use it to strike the statue with a powerful blow. The statue crumbled to the ground, revealing a hidden passage that led even deeper into the dungeon. The adventurers hesitated for a moment, unsure if they should continue. But Koth-Thotmeo knew that they had come too far to turn back now. With a determined look on his face, he led the way into the darkness, ready for whatever lay ahead. As the group descended the stairs, they could feel the temperature dropping rapidly. The air grew colder and denser with each step, making it harder to breathe. The walls were lined with ice and frost, and the sound of dripping water echoed throughout the chamber. Koth-Thotmeo led the group, their eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger. They noticed a large block of ice in the center of the room, with something encased within it. As they approached it, they could see a faint light glowing from within the ice. One of the players, named Sarah, reached out to touch the ice. Suddenly, the ice shattered, revealing a small, glowing orb. As Sarah reached for the orb, they heard a faint whisper in the back of their mind, warning them of danger. Koth-Thotmeo recognized the orb as a source of great power and urged caution. The other players hesitated, unsure of what to do next. Suddenly, the room grew colder, and a menacing figure emerged from the shadows. It was a massive, horned creature with skin as black as coal. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and its breath came out in ragged, icy puffs. The creature let out a deafening roar and charged at the group. The players braced themselves for the attack, but Kothphotmio was quick to act. They remembered an old spell that could turn the creature's power against it. With a flick of their wrist and a few whispered words, Kothphotmio sent a blast of energy towards the creature. The creature was caught off guard and stumbled backwards, weakened by the spell. The players seized the opportunity and attacked, their weapons glowing with magical energy. The battle was fierce and intense, but with Kothphotmio's guidance, the players emerged victorious. The horned creature let out a final roar and dissolved into nothingness. As the group caught their breath, they realized that the room had returned to its normal temperature, and the ice had begun to melt away. They looked at Kothphotmio in awe, grateful for their leadership and guidance. But the dungeon master knew that this was only the beginning. There were still many more dangers lurking in the shadows, waiting to be discovered. As the party approached the entrance to the cave, Kothphotmio grinned mischievously. He had something special in store for them. The entrance was hidden behind a large boulder, but Kothphotmio knew the secret to revealing it. He pulled out a small amulet from his pocket and recited a spell under his breath. Suddenly, the boulder began to shift and slide to the side, revealing a dark passageway leading into the depths of the cave. The party stepped inside, their torches illuminating the way. The walls were lined with rough, jagged rocks and the air was damp and musty. Kothphotmio led the way, eager to see the looks on their faces when they discovered what he had in store for them. Suddenly, they heard a loud screeching noise coming from further down the passage. Kothphotmio stopped in his tracks and signaled for the party to be quiet. They crept forward cautiously, their weapons at the ready. As they turned a corner, they saw a group of goblins standing guard in front of a large metal gate. Kothphotmio grinned wickedly and signaled for the party to attack. The battle was intense, with the goblins putting up a fierce fight. But with Kothphotmio's guidance, the party was able to emerge victorious. They pushed open the metal gate, revealing a large chamber with a glowing crystal in the center. Kothphotmio explained that the crystal was a powerful magical artifact that could grant wishes. The party was skeptical, but Kothphotmio assured them that it was true. All they had to do was touch the crystal and make their wish. The party approached the crystal tentatively, wondering if Kothphotmio was playing a trick on them. But as they touched the crystal, they felt a surge of power flow through them. They closed their eyes and made their wishes. As they opened their eyes, they saw that their wishes had come true. Kothphotmio smiled at their expressions of wonder and satisfaction. He had truly outdone himself this time. But little did they know, there was a catch to the wishes granted by the crystal. And as they made their way out of the cave, they would soon discover the consequences of their desires. As the players continued their journey through the dungeon, Kothphotmio described a large room ahead of them with a glowing crystal in the center. You enter the room to find a crystal unlike any you have ever seen before. It glows with a pulsing blue light, and as you approach it, you feel its power emanating through the air. What do you do? Quote, the players looked at each other, unsure of what to do next. I want to investigate the crystal, said Lyra, the elf rogue. As Lyra approached the crystal, Kothphotmio described how she felt a surge of energy as she got closer. Suddenly, the crystal shattered, and Lyra was thrown back by a blast of magical energy. The other players rushed to her side, checking to make sure she was okay. What just happened? Asked Thorgar, the dwarven fighter. I'm not sure, replied Kothphotmio. But I think the crystal may have been some sort of magical trap. We need to be careful as we continue on. The players nodded, and they continued deeper into the dungeon, their guard up and their senses on high alert. As the party descended deeper into the dungeon, the air grew colder and more damp. The flickering torches cast eerie shadows on the walls, and the sound of dripping water echoed through the halls. Koth-Photmio could see that the players were becoming more cautious as they progressed, taking extra care to check for traps and hidden doors. They were also growing more anxious as the challenges grew more difficult. As they approached a large chamber, Koth-Photmio could sense that something was not right. He warned the players to be careful, but they were too focused on the treasure they could see gleaming at the far end of the room. Suddenly, the floor gave way beneath them, and they fell into a pit filled with spikes. 2 of the players were impaled and killed instantly, while the third was badly injured. Koth-Photmio knew that this was a risk of dungeon crawling, but he couldn't help feeling responsible for the players' deaths. He wondered if he had gone too far in his attempts to create a challenging and exciting adventure. As the remaining players struggled to escape the pit, Koth-Photmio contemplated how to proceed. Would the player want to continue, or would they be too traumatized by the loss of their companions to continue on? As the players descended deeper into the dungeon, they found themselves in a large chamber with high ceilings. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the sound of dripping water echoed throughout the room. Koth-Photmio described the chamber in vivid detail, pointing out the numerous stalactites hanging from the ceiling and the piles of bones littering the floor. The players were on high alert, knowing that danger lurked around every corner. Suddenly, a group of goblins emerged from the shadows, their beady eyes fixed on the players. Koth-Photmio quickly sprang into action, rolling his dice and determining the outcome of the battle. The players fought fiercely, dodging the goblins' crude weapons and unleashing powerful spells. It was a tough battle, but in the end, the players emerged victorious. Exhausted but exhilarated, the players took a moment to catch their breath and collect themselves before moving on to the next challenge that awaited them in the depths of the dungeon. As the players descend the stairs, they find themselves in a large cavern, dimly lit by flickering torches mounted on the walls. The air is thick with the musty scent of damp stone and mildew. As their eyes adjust to the low light, they begin to make out the rough outline of a massive stone structure in the center of the cavern. Koth-Photmio, as the player, takes the lead, drawing his sword and shield as he approaches the structure. The other 2 players follow close behind, their hands poised to unleash spells at a moment's notice. As they approach the structure, they see that it is a towering stone tower, rising high above their heads. Its walls are rough hewn and craggy, and its massive wooden doors are barred shut with thick iron chains. Koth-Photmio steps forward and places his hand on the door, feeling its rough texture beneath his fingertips. With a deep breath, he braces himself and heaves against the chains, straining with all his might to break them. The chains resist his efforts, their metal links creaking and groaning under the strain. But with a final surge of effort, Koth-Photmio manages to snap them apart, sending the heavy chains clattering to the ground. With a nod of satisfaction, Koth-Photmio pushes open the doors, revealing a dark and foreboding interior. The players ready their weapons and step inside, their hearts pounding in their chests as they prepare to face whatever dangers may lie ahead. As the adventurers continue deeper into the dungeon, they come across a massive room with a high ceiling that's covered in intricate carvings. In the center of the room is a massive stone pedestal with a shimmering gemstone resting on top. Koth-Photmio looks around the room in awe, while Bruna cautiously approaches the pedestal. Suddenly, the floor begins to shake, and the adventurers quickly realize that the gemstone is the source of the tremors. The stone begins to crack, and the air is filled with a blinding light as the gemstone explodes, revealing a dark, ominous figure in its place. The figure lets out an ear-piercing screech, and the adventurers ready themselves for battle. They soon realize, however, that their weapons are useless against the creature, and they must use their wits and quick reflexes to outmaneuver it. Koth-Photmio takes the lead, using his vast knowledge of the arcane to conjure powerful spells that blast the creature back. Bruna is quick on her feet, dodging the creature's attacks and delivering swift kicks to its weak spots. Finally, after a long and grueling battle, the creature lets out a final scream and disappears into thin air. The adventurers are victorious, and they all let out a sigh of relief. They look around the room, their eyes filled with wonder and amazement at the power they possess. The dungeon may have been challenging, but it has only fueled the desire for more adventures. Kothphotmio led the group deeper into the dungeon, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the walls. The torchlight flickered and danced, casting eerie shadows around them. The air grew colder and more damp as they ventured further in. Suddenly, they heard a low growling noise. It was coming from up ahead, around a bend in the corridor. Kothphotmio motioned for the group to stay back as he crept forward, his hand on the hilt of his sword. As he rounded the corner, he saw a large chamber filled with goblins. They were huddled together, snarling and baring their teeth. Kothphotmio knew they had to act fast. He signaled to the group, and they all charged into the room, weapons drawn. The goblins shrieked and lunged at him, but the adventurers were quick and skilled. They fought their way through the horde, their swords and axes slicing through the air. In the end, they emerged victorious, but not without taking some wounds. They paused to catch their breath and tend to their injuries. "That was intense," one of the players said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I thought we were done for a minute there." Kothphotmio nodded, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of danger. "We can't let our guard down yet. There's still much more to explore." As the adventurers ventured deeper into the dungeon, the air grew colder and the darkness grew more oppressive. Kothphotmio had done an excellent job at crafting a challenging and immersive world, and the players were completely absorbed in their surroundings. They had encountered numerous traps and puzzles, each one more intricate than the last, and the tension in the room was palpable. Every step they took could be their last, and the players were forced to think carefully about every decision they made. Despite the danger, they pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets of the dungeon and claim its treasures. As they descended deeper into the depths, they could hear the faint sound of running water in the distance, and the sense of foreboding grew stronger. Finally, they came upon a large underground river, its waters murky and treacherous. Across the river, they could see a gleaming treasure chest, but to reach it, they would have to find a way across the treacherous waters. Kothphotmio leaned back in his chair, a sly smile on his face, as the players debated the next move. It was moments like these that made being a dungeon master so rewarding, watching as his players navigated the challenges he had created. Little did they know, the most dangerous challenges were still to come. The group approached the final room of the dungeon. As they pushed open the heavy stone door, they were greeted by an eerie silence. The room was empty except for a large pedestal in the center. On the pedestal sat a small wooden chest. Kothphotmio warned the group to be cautious, as this could be a trap. But the treasure was too enticing to ignore. The rogue, who had been quiet for most of the adventure, quickly darted towards the chest. As soon as he touched it, a loud rumbling noise echoed through the room. Suddenly, the walls began to move, closing in on the group. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped. Kothphotmio shouted for everyone to work together to find a way out. The fighter and wizard searched for a hidden mechanism while the rogue tried to pick the lock on the chest. With time running out, the rogue managed to unlock the chest, revealing a glimmering gemstone. As he picked it up, the walls suddenly stopped moving and the room returned to its original state. The group breathed a sigh of relief, and Kothphotmio praised them for their bravery and quick thinking. As they exited the dungeon, the group realized they had formed a bond during their adventure, and perhaps they would embark on more quests together in the future. As the adventurers emerged from the depths of the dungeon, They were battered and bruised, but victorious. Kothphotmio congratulated them on their success, noting how their cleverness and quick thinking had helped them overcome the many obstacles in their path. The group sat around the table, recounting their adventures and sharing a celebratory meal. They toasted to each other's health and the success of their mission, all the while basking in the glow of a job well done. As the night wore on, the adventurers eventually bid their farewells, each going their separate ways with the knowledge that they had accomplished something great. Kothphotmio stayed behind to clean up the table and put away the game pieces, but not before taking a moment to reflect on the night's events. For Kothphotmio, it was a reminder of why he loved being a dungeon master. He loved watching his players immerse themselves in the game, using their imaginations and working together to overcome the challenges he had set before them. It was a feeling like no other, and one that he hoped to experience again and again. As he closed up the game and turned off the lights, Kothphotmio smiled to himself, already thinking about the next adventure he would create. For him, the game was never truly over. There was always another story waiting to be told, and another group of adventurers ready to embark on a grand quest. I hope you have enjoyed this story. If you want me to create more, please let me know by leaving a comment. Also, Kothphotmio is a creator on YouTube who I believe is one of the best content creator outside of Bad Sad. If you are interested in his work, please look in the description for the link to his channel. One more thing before I end this video. Kothphotmio's latest videos can be found by selecting the live option at the top of his channel page. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to visit Just All in One Resource. Take care everyone, and please stay safe.